chasing a giant pig through the snow. That is the kind of glamorous job you get when you re the son of Zeus and sentenced to 12 labors. Forget shining armor or throne rooms. Tonight, Hercules gets to wrestle with an overgrown boar that basically moonlighted as a natural disaster. Now, this boar wasn't just any pig. The Erymanthian boar had a reputation. It lived on Mount Erymanthos in Arcadia, which was already the kind of place ancient Greeks thought was remote, rugged, and a little too rustic for comfort. The animal was said to be massive, tusked, and incredibly destructive. Think less farmyard pig and more apocalypse on hooves. Farmers dreaded it. Shepherds swore at it. And Eurystheus, the king who was sending Hercules on all these delightful errands, thought it was the perfect thing to keep his half-brother occupied. Nothing says family bonding quite like forcing your relative to go tackle a giant pig in the snow while you sit warm at home. Let's remember who Hercules was at this point in the story. He's already dealt with the Nemean lion, that fur-covered tank of an animal whose skin couldn't be pierced. He's already tangled with the Hydra, the mythological equivalent of a multi-headed plumbing problem. He's caught the golden hind of Artemis, a glowing deer that outran everything. And now he's being sent to fetch a pig. You can imagine him sighing. It's like winning Olympic gold and then being asked to scrub toilets. But of course, there's a twist. This wasn't about the boar itself. It was about humiliating Hercules. Eurystheus, remember, hated him. He wanted Hercules out of the way. If the beast killed him, wonderful. If it didn't, Eurystheus still got to laugh at him dragging a squealing pig back to the palace. It was a win-win situation for the petty king. And Hercules knew this, but in that calm, long-suffering way of Greek heroes, he just picked up his club, slung his bow over his shoulder, and headed out into the mountains. And it wasn't just the cold and the hunt. This labor comes with one of those little side quests mythology loves so much. Because along the way, Hercules stopped by the house of a centaur. His name was Pholus. And like most centaurs, Pholus was supposed to be half wild, half dangerous. But not this one. Pholus was polite, thoughtful, and actually friendly. He welcomed Hercules in, offered him food, conversation, and warmth, which was rare in the labor circuit. Usually people either screamed when Hercules showed up or begged him to kill a monster. But Pholus, he was just a good host. And then came the wine. Because it wouldn't be Greek mythology without wine messing things up. Pholus had a giant jar of sacred wine, kept in storage for all the centaurs of the region. It wasn't his personal stash, more like a community barrel. But the son of Zeus decided to open it. Because why not? He was cold, tired, and constantly being sent on pig-chasing errands. He deserved a drink. The smell drifted out into the mountains, and, predictably, the rest of the centaurs smelled it too. Now, centaurs in myth were usually depicted as wild partiers, think frat boys, but with hooves and better archery. They came charging in, furious that someone had cracked open their wine without permission. And suddenly, Hercules' pig-hunting trip turned into a centaur brawl. Arrows flew, hooves thundered, Hercules swung his club left and right. And in the chaos, more than a few centaurs were killed. It's the kind of bizarre subplot that makes you wonder if the ancient storytellers were just padding the runtime. The labor was about a boar, but somehow Hercules ended up in a bar fight with horsemen because he couldn't resist opening a wine jar. It tells you something about his character, stronger than anyone, deadlier than most monsters. But patient, disciplined, absolutely not. Hercules had a habit of turning detours into disasters. And poor Pholus, he wasn't fighting, he was just trying to clean up after the chaos. He picked up one of Hercules' poisoned arrows, curious about how deadly they were, and of course he dropped it onto his foot, and just like that, Pholus died. A kind, hospitable centaur, gone, just because Hercules couldn't keep the wine corked. It's one of those tragic little footnotes that myths love to sprinkle in. Hercules carried the guilt, but as usual, he moved on, because the pig still needed catching. Now, about the actual hunt. The Erymanthian boar was supposed to be terrifying, huge, tusked, strong enough to uproot trees, and angry enough to terrorize villages. Farmers couldn't touch it. Hunters failed miserably. And then along came Hercules, trudging up the snow-covered slopes. His strategy wasn't brute force this time. He knew better. He couldn't just charge a mountain-sized pig and hope for the best. So he did something rare for him. He used patience. He chased the boar through the snow, shouting, waving his arms, making noise, slowly driving it upward, further and further into the high mountains where the snow was deep and the air thin. Hercules didn't need to fight it head-on. He just needed the beast to tire out, and eventually in the heavy snowdrifts, that's exactly what happened. The great boar, unable to run, became trapped in the drifts, and Hercules pounced. Now picture this. The strongest man in the world wrestling a giant pig in the snow. It sounds ridiculous, but that's the myth. He tied it up, probably with ropes or chains, and began the long march back. Imagine the sight. Hercules dragging a furious, squealing boar behind him, snow still clinging to his lion-skin cloak, not exactly heroic looking, more like the aftermath of the worst winter hunting trip ever. And this is where Eurystheus enters the story again. Hercules brought the boar back alive, as instructed, hauled it all the way to Tiryns, and when Eurystheus saw it, he panicked. The king who loved to assign impossible chores was not so brave in person. He looked at the tusks, the massive size, the thrashing rage of the animal, and immediately dove into a storage jar to hide, literally, a giant pithos jar, the kind used for grain and wine. The great king of Mycenae, cowering in a pot, while Hercules stood there holding the rope of a giant pig. This became a running theme, actually. Eurystheus kept sending Hercules on these tasks, but whenever Hercules came back with proof, whether it was a monster's skin, a set of birds, or a live boar, the king would nearly faint. He wanted Hercules dead, not successful, and each completed labor just made him look more cowardly, which, for us, is part of the fun. The contrast between the muscle-bound, half-divine hero doing impossible tasks and the whiny, panicked king quivering in his palace. The Greeks loved that kind of irony. And if you zoom out a little, the labor fits into a pattern. The first few tasks were all about animals, a lion, a hydra, a deer, and now a boar. It was like a mythological safari. Each creature symbolized chaos, untamed nature, or divine anger. And Hercules, he was the Hulk sent to wrestle nature back into submission, to prove that even the wildest beasts could be caught, tamed, or dragged squealing into town. It's no wonder later cultures loved the imagery. Rome, for example, adored Hercules. He was the symbol of conquering the wild, of pushing civilization's boundaries, which of course also made him the perfect bedtime story figure, because nothing lulls you into sleep quite like imagining a tired, overworked demigod dragging a pig through the snow.